Now that we have quorum, most of our members are on Zoom today, so thank you. We'll just kick off with apologies. I've got apologies from Councillor O'Leary, Councillor Pascoe, and potentially Councillor Donovan towards the end. Is that right? No longer required. Any other apologies? None. I'll move those. Seconded by Councillor Sarah. Any against? None carried. Declaration of interest. Sorry, confirmation of agenda. You'll have before you the run sheet for today. There's no, as circulated. I'll move. Seconded, Councillor Sarah. Carried. Sorry, Mark, I can't because you're not officially on the committee. We'll have to remedy that. Is there any declarations of interest? None. We do have public forum, so I'm going to welcome our guests shortly. Just before we do, I'm just going to hand over to Blair.
Thank you, Chair Ryan, and good morning, everyone. I'm just wondering if I might be able to invite a new member of my staff to the front table. Mark Davey has commenced with Council this week. Mark is our new City Planning Manager. Just let Mark grab a seat. And so Mark has responsibility for the City Planning team. Mark joins us from most recently Auckland Transport, and prior to that Mark was working with Waikato District Council, and prior to that has had quite a history in the commercial world, and prior to that some time in academia where he studied and gained a PhD at Auckland University in urban planning. So delighted to have Mark on the team, and I also just want to acknowledge and thank Deborah Stan-Barton, who has been the acting City Planning Manager for the last nearly 6 months, and following Luke's passing. So I want to first thank you, Deborah, for everything you have done, and we're in a sort of a 2-week transition period for Mark, and Mark is on deck. So just really want to welcome Mark to this committee. Mark will be obviously the principal technical advisor to the committee in terms of City Planning Manager role. I just wonder whether, Mark, you want to say a few brief words.
Thanks for that. I'm not sure if I'm on. Am I on?
On,
yeah,
Reed.
Cool. Thanks for the introduction, Blair, and pleasure to be here. I guess it's a really exciting time in terms of everything that's going on, and we'll hear about that, a bit about that today. But yeah, keen to be part of the journey and I guess help solve some of the problems that are facing the city in terms of legislation and other things. So pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Great, thanks Blair, and yeah, welcome to the team, and thanks also Deborah for your work in the last half year. It's been a lot of moving targets for all the team, so thank you, and we'll no doubt might hear from you a bit later, Mark. All right, I'd like to welcome up Sandy Elliott, speaking on behalf of item 6 in the Chair's report. Welcome, Sandy. We have about 5 minutes, so you might want to use that time or save a little bit for questions at the end from elected members.
Cool. Yeah, I will try and keep it quite brief. I'm Sandy Elliott. I'm here on behalf of the West Claudelands Action Network. It's actually, it and its predecessors have been working for about the last 30 years to protect the Claudelands area, so there's quite a long precedent and there's quite a strong group. We put in a letter with 26 signatories, sort of responding to the bill, and we're too late submissions, but we're just trying to get some action going. The group has mainly been concerned about protecting Claudelands from the effects of haphazard development, which occurred in around about the 70s. So that was really the trigger that got the group going. Stan Jones here was one of the earliest members of that, and we've had some continuity of that group engaging with council processes over the decades. So I just want to kind of stress that precedent, and it's not just something fresh off the block. So we put in a letter. This is a few key points out of that. I mean, firstly, we actually agreed with the council's submission. It's quite a strong submission. You guys know all those points, so I don't need to go over that. But we're on the same page. And we did acknowledge that medium density development can bring vibrant and demographically diverse community. We've kind of got that in Claudelands already. because of that development, is actually medium density already. But if it's going to be done, it needs to be done properly. And that's the problem. The stuff that was done in the 1970s was done badly. There's ugly buildings just crammed in there. The third point is that we requested further meetings between WeCan and the council, or whoever we can, to discuss further action steps. Obviously, things have moved on quite quickly, and we've now got an act, not a bill. But I've noticed since those amendments that Section 77L allows for the qualifying matters. That could exempt Claudins from the medium density sort of permissions. So as I mentioned before, we have this long running precedent to protect a special, if not unique, character area in Hamilton, which provides amenity to the city and would be lost. So maybe that's an angle in for us to continue some level of protection of the area. So I would like to explore further with council the qualifying matters aspect of the Act. So it's a brief rundown. I take it that that letter's been tabled and stuff already. So it really opens us to questions. I did say I'd keep it brief, and the short time. I'm sure if there's no particular questions, Stan would be happy to have a word as well. But I guess the questions take priority.
Thanks, Sandy. I guess a question from me, probably to staff. I think our team has liaised with you a little bit in terms of how we might support you and the qualifying matters, and as an organisation still trying to wrap our head around the bill which potentially becomes ratified tomorrow. So I think through Blair there's an assurance that we'll work as best we can to, within the realm of qualifying matters, see what we can do.
Yes, Chair Ryan, the team, I believe, have already been in touch through our sort of engagement process, and so we'll continue that discussion and obviously take on board and work with this feedback and as we progress our response to the legislation.
I don't have any other questions. Oh, sorry, Councillor Martin.
Yeah, you can of course confirm in a previous life I was on council when the Claudelins, just wanted to do a big shout out when I was years ago on the council. And this is, if I can say to colleagues, this is a really great example of a local initiative, grassroots. My question, in addition to protecting Claudelins or doing what we can, I guess it's to Blair, we also have, in part because of the leadership that the Claudelins area, that was a significant first, I think. We've got parts of Hamilton East. So the question is, where are we at in terms of doing everything we can legally to do what we can to preserve or still lobby for these areas? And I'm wondering are we essentially looking at the Claudelins Hamilton East area?
Sorry, just on Zoom they're asking if we can just speak up a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Martin. I'm actually going to direct that to Deborah and possibly Deborah and the team just to respond to.
Good morning, Councillor. We have a project looking at all of the heritage items throughout the city, items and areas. So we'll be considering the matter across the city.
I think the issue, though, we have, and forgive me, and I acknowledge Alice in the room as well, we have issues of heritage which are individual buildings, but then, of course, where the legislation has probably not helped us at all is the character areas. Now, I personally totally know, because of the history, the Claudelins character area, but also there's a chunk of Hamilton East as well, and I'm just wanting to clarify next steps.
Well, we will be able to determine whether or not these areas or individual items would fit to be a qualifying matter. So that's an assessment that's going on now.
Through the Chair, can I suggest that, notwithstanding the legislation always evolves, that we do need to have a very clear focus on what we can and can't do, and then we should continue to lobby. Would that be, I think there's some political leadership still needed here, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely, yeah, and we're going to cover off a lot of that today.
Right.
This qualifying matters piece around heritage and SNA, and for us now, Te Ture Whaimana, is the opportunity for us to give real meaning to this bill from a Hamilton perspective.
Yeah.
And 100% we will be doing that.
And absolutely acknowledging the staff work in this area, of course.
And if I can just, Councillor Martin, assure you that the staff, the team, absolutely understand the intent of your question and the work that is happening is exploring all of those areas.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Okay, we're going to move on to item 5, confirmation of the District Plan Committee minutes of the 4th of November. I'm happy to move. Seconded with Councillor Sarah. Is there any debate? Those in favour? I can only look to Zoom because all my members are on Zoom. Any against? None. Carried. Thank you. Unanimously. Follow the record. Chair's report, item 6. Largely take as read. Just a couple of key things. We obviously submitted to the bill quite a strong submission. And to start with the positives, they acknowledged Te Ture Whaimana as a qualifying matter, which is significant and very bespoke for us as a city and region. And they carved out peacocks, which was also important. Otherwise, we would have lost traction on the work we'd done there. And the peacock submitted had also done their own submission as well. So those are a couple of the big clunky bits, and there was a few concessions that are sort of identified in here and through the report. But what that means now, effectively, is how we can use those qualifying matters as a means to control or influence this clumsy bill across the city. So the staff are trying to wrap around their heads, and in fact, with this agenda today, it's been a case of pivot, adjust. So I just acknowledge the work staff have done it leading into today's agenda, given that this bill gets ratified tomorrow. So there is a feels like a lot of moving targets with this process. But I'll leave it there unless there's any questions on Chair's report. Blair's just informed me it got fully ratified last night.
It is a done thing.
Okay, if there are no questions, sorry, Councillor Martin.
I might make a brief comment. I don't have a question, but I have a comment about what I'd like us to do.
Should we move into debate then? I'll move, seconded by yourself. You can head us off.
Yeah, look, I suspect others will be far more eloquent than me, but I think you talked about a clumsy bill, and I totally agree that a one size should not fit all. Having said that, certainly acknowledging yet again that we have a severe, awful housing crisis, and quite legitimately, I think some of the media are also somewhat critical of some aspects of local government as well. I guess we just have a slight difference with the Parliament, the majority of the Parliament, as to how we get from A to B, but I think it's really important that once we see examples of negative, right, we bring that to the attention of our MPs and the Parliament and the parties. Having said that, once we see any examples of the positive, we should also be quite upfront and acknowledge that. And as I've said, irrespective of this legislation, really interested in the ongoing work around design, because quite frankly, if you look at the history of local government, even in this city, we have some really good developments, and we have some awful, scungy, crap developments which previous legislation, our bylaws, our district plan has enabled. You know, even though around this table it was not our will for that, some developers, a minority of developers, are very skillful at driving the proverbial truck through and build it, make the dough, and then move on, and the rest of us pick up the pieces. Having said that, we're seeing examples of some really good development as well. Councillor Ryan, one of the things I would like to do, in the late Luke with the team presented a very good booklet, which I still must get my copy of the good and the bad and the ugly. And it's one of about 2 or 3 things in this council I continue to get frustrated. Whoever will come with me, I just want to jump in a bus in the new year or a minivan and go on for us to have an on-the-ground look at stuff that is working, all right? How does the new legislation affect that, and the stuff that is really bad, which came up under our watch, all right? So this is not just a situation of central government imposing stuff on us. They've responded, the Parliament has responded to their perception correctly of a crisis, but we have to acknowledge that, quite frankly, in some areas we in local government collectively haven't done too well either. So I'm just really wanting us to do some of that on the ground stuff. That also relates parallel to that. Bear with me, and Ewan hasn't yet. I will stop. For what we're talking about our annual plan, urban renewal. What does treescapes look like? What can we do street level? All that stuff that we want. So I am really looking forward to us getting in. Getting in the bus. Instead of a group at Clawlands, we're all going to do some team building stuff. Let's get in the old coach and do some walk-arounds. Okay.
Councillor Ewan.
Thanks, Mr Chair, and thank you for letting me speak, although I'm not a member. Look, I have a slightly different position than my good friend, Councillor Gallagher, but let me first start by saying where we do agree is this country has a housing crisis. And the Now Act that passed last night, I don't believe will fix the crisis, but I think it will create an even bigger crisis moving forward. And at the heart of the crisis is the 3x3. So we can now have 3 dwellings to 3 floors on a section. And I think the most significant, and it's hard to articulate or elevate what I'm about to say more importantly, but people will have woken up this morning not realising that they've had a significant deterioration in their property rights and their expectation. The sections and the communities that they have been living in have overnight changed. I have to say, and where I differ from my good friend Councillor Gallagher, is in fact this one cannot be placed at the foot of local government. I think district plans and our local government councils have worked very hard to send a very clear and well-articulated message to Wellington, acknowledging the crisis they were trying to fix, but they have put forward what we believe is a flawed solution. And we are now somewhat going to have to manage the implementation with both of our hands being tied behind our back, and we will be the interface between people who have just lost their property rights and a piece of legislation that we told Wellington was not a sensible solution to the crisis we all agree there is and exists. So I say to the people of Hamilton and, in fact, people of New Zealand, I'm sorry about what's happened overnight. We now in local government will do the very, very best in the formulation of our district plan to identify qualifying areas to protect heritage, but fundamentally the game has changed and we're not going to be easily able to unravel it. And it's not at the feet of local government.
Thank you. We'll go Mayor Paula and then Councillor Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I just couldn't hear anybody at home, so I was jumping. Never mind. Just on this, thank you for the great work that the team have done in taking that submission down to Wellington. And from everyone that I've spoken to, you did an excellent job, and we did manage to make some traction with some of the issues. Having said that, I agree with Councillor Wilson. This is a big change to our communities, and it's come quite quickly upon us. Now, we already were embarking on a district plan review for a variety of reasons to solve the problem that government's trying to solve, but also to get community building right. So we had already some residents that were unhappy with the way that infill development was occurring and what was happening to their property rights and their communities. So we were always upping the ante on that anyway. And then this comes in and pushes that all to the side. And I liken this to something that's got good intent, but we're really using a sledgehammer to crack a nut now. And my biggest concern, because we are prepared to do growth. We have thought and talked a lot about how we do growth, and we've engaged with our development community a lot. And Ryan, credit to you and your chairmanship of this committee in that regard as well. But the biggest concerns I have, apart from how we drive quality and community building alongside housing. Yes, we do need housing, and we needed it yesterday, we needed it last year. So we absolutely got to tackle housing, but we are doing that. We are providing high levels of infill. We have got really good growth strategies. I think Future-Proof, Hamilton Metro Spatial Plan are really good tools and show us where we are to develop, and it goes hand in glove with the infrastructure, and that's the important bit I'm getting to here. To build more houses, we need more water services, and they're not cheap. We need more roading, and that's not cheap. And that's before you even get into the community infrastructure like libraries, playgrounds, parks, access to school, and all those kind of things that we've been working through. My biggest concern is the cost, and I really want to say to the government, we are coming at you for some share of money to help us with this infrastructure crisis. As much as it's a housing crisis, it's an infrastructure crisis, because we have not got the money nor the debt capacity we need to do everything we've got to do. And that's why we put strategic planning in place to focus our efforts where we could realistically make a difference. And actually, compared to many councils, we've put a pretty tenacious budget against growth in our long-term plan. It's a big infrastructure budget, and it's still not enough with what's coming at us. It's not enough. So the biggest conversation I'm having with government as I go about my year next year is show us some money to help us get over this infrastructure hurdle. We need to walk alongside you with funding. You need to understand the pressures of the metros in particular, and Hamilton is one of the fastest growing metros, and we face the greatest pressures of all. We need your help, government, to put that infrastructure in place, and a broad brush housing bill goes against that, because it means now our attention will be scattered all across the city instead of where we were going to focus our attention. That's my biggest concern. Thank you for letting me go over a bit.
That's right. I always like to bank some credits. Councillor Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I just wanted to say that we got some good results from our submissions, so thank you to yourself and also the staff for putting it together and presenting it. I think there's been some discussion around the property rights, but we also need to be talking about the right to housing, and it's important that we are doing what we can do to support greater affordability. So overall, I do support the intention of what the government is trying to do here to increase capacity and to focus that capacity in our existing areas with intensification rather than encouraging more and more sprawl, which we know comes with its own problems. I don't think the changes that were made necessarily go far enough to ensure that we're getting the balance right with also creating really livable neighbourhoods. But there were some changes which I think will improve what was initially proposed. One of the concerns that I have is around the continual removal of mature trees, and that's something that I hope that Parliament will be able to address in the near future, because if you look out over the city right at the moment, you see a wonderful canopy of trees, but with this bill, that could mean really the obliteration of many mature trees across the city. I think that as a council, we need to be looking really closely right now at our green space policy with more intensification is only going to become more and more critical. So I'm keen to have a conversation with you, Chair, or for us to have that conversation even today around what the next steps are around amending our policy to ensure that we're driving the right amount of green space. I think that the biggest concern here now is the infrastructure cost, as Mayor Paula outlined, and that is going to be a real challenge given we can't necessarily target certain areas. But I also, I guess, wanted to point out maybe the irony with the way that local governance finances infrastructure through development contribution. Yesterday we were having a conversation where we were worried that we may be oversupplying infrastructure and that we wouldn't be getting revenue back fast enough. And yet, at the same time, we're saying that we want to drive more affordable sections and more affordable housing. And we can't really have both at the same time. So I just think that we need to keep in mind when we're looking at how much infrastructure we're providing versus what the demand might be, that actually constraining that infrastructure to ensure that we're getting the revenue back at I guess, in a time frame that we think is appropriate, isn't necessarily helpful to this housing crisis either. But absolutely support Mayor Paula's comments around continuing to lobby for more ways to finance this infrastructure. Yes.
Thanks. Yeah, look, I largely agree with everything that's been said as well. I think just in reply to Councillor Sarah there in terms of the chicken and egg with infrastructure, I think I'd rather be on the front end of it because we've been caught out previously a little bit where demand comes and then we're not ready, we don't have the investment made, and it's much slower to invest for the future. If we've got infrastructure in place, then we can multiply at scale. And all things are trending in that direction, so I'd rather be ahead of the curve. One thing that I think everyone should be aware of is the area plan work. To do the infrastructure for those 5-6 areas is circa $6 billion. The thing about that, it's a huge amount of money, but at least we've got a chance of defining it, of rating it, of doing off-balance sheet models, of charging for it, of doing financial contributions, of DCs, of rating. But this bill just dilutes infill all across the city. So how the heck are we supposed to provide meaningful infrastructure in a logical and sequential way? I'm really pleased we got Te Ture identified as a qualifying matter in the bill, and there is a sub-clause. I was quick to, our new guy Mark yesterday said it's very vague, but my direction, my mandate, my Hamilton hat to staff will be to take those qualifying matters to the nth degree and pull back and push back so that we can get good, future-proof, well-considered design for this city. I'm not gonna. If there's an opportunity, we need to lean in and absolutely do it, even if we're front-footing it for the whole of the country. So that's my clear intention and my personal mandate that I'll be driving. Thank you. All right, we will go to the vote. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, we're on to item 7. Amy, are you heading this off for us?
Morena councillors, Mayor Paula. This morning, so I'll take the report as read, but I'll comment on a few key points before passing over for questions. So the purpose of the report coming to you today is to fulfil one of our requirements under the MPSUD, which is to insert housing bottom lines into our district plan. This is a requirement for all high growth councils, including Hamilton, Waikato and Waipa districts, and also for the regional council at the regional policy statement level. As noted in the report, the change is mandatory and should be done without a full Schedule 1 consultative process. However, any change to the district plan needs to be approved by council, so we come to you for endorsement and then we take it to council hopefully tomorrow. So the purpose of the housing bottom lines is a statement of the amount of capacity enabled in the plan plus a buffer of 20% in the short to medium term and 15% in the long term, that our district plan needs to enable to meet what we think is the forecast demand over the next 30 years, so that the long-term period is next 30 years. Previously, and in the current district plan currently, we had a series of housing targets, but government through the NPSUD chose to reframe this as bottom line, so it's the minimum amount of capacity to be enabled rather than a target to be achieved. So it's really just a reframing. So the updated targets have been derived from the Future-Proof Housing Development Capacity Assessment, also known as the HBA. This assessment was undertaken in partnership with all of our future-proof partners, including MFE and MHUD, who worked with us throughout the process to develop the scope and methodology. Also worth noting that MFE have reviewed the HBA and overall found that it provides a comprehensive assessment and that it meets the requirements of the NPSUD 2020. A final version of this report will be released this week, and that will be published online on the Future-Proof website. On a related note, I know that through the Future-Proof strategy hearings last week, some of you may be aware there were some questions around the evidence base underpinning the Future-Proof strategy, including the HBA. So staff are working through Future-Proof to address any of these comments and questions, which will form part of the deliberations report back to the hearings panel, including the intention to meet with key submitters, including Professor Scrimmager, to discuss his submission in the new year. There'll also be an opportunity for you all to provide feedback on the Future-Proof strategy through strategic growth in the new year. And as I said, yeah, any matters for clarification or change, Future-Proof will incorporate in the strategy, and we'll use it to inform our future work program, which includes the next iteration of the HBA, which we need to do in time to inform the 2024 LTP. So we'll be kicking off the next one pretty soon. Happy to pass over to any questions.
Thanks, Amy. Really good report. Councillor Sarah.
Thanks, Chair Ryan. Thanks, Amy. My question is around, so we have bottom lines here that have been derived from the Future-Proof work. Are we looking at like targets as well beyond that in terms of what we're beyond what's required as bottom lines, but what we want to achieve as a council?
So the HBA itself, which is actually the assessment of capacity and our sufficiency to meet that, shows that we are enabling more capacity over and above what the minimum targets require, including the buffer, the competitiveness margin. And then obviously the work that we're doing at the moment through this committee to enable further intensification that will enable, again, another quantum order of magnitude of further capacity over and above what's already enabled. So the work we're doing is definitely looking to shift that dial to provide significantly more capacity within the infill areas.
Okay, and that, I guess, updated level of capacity, when do you expect we'll have visibility over that? And is there any way of modelling what impact that could have, I guess, in terms of the impact of that greater supply on pricing and things?
Yes, potentially. So we're working through, obviously the bill just got passed, so what we're doing in the first instance is rebuilding some of those models that we've got at the back end to estimate what that capacity is, because it's quite a different way of looking at capacity than our standard duplex model. So we're anticipating having the results of the modelling through in the new year, probably in time for the next committee in March, I believe. So I'm not sure if at that point we'll have a really good understanding of the impact on prices, but we will have some understanding of the quantum, and I think we can probably look at what types of housing are enabled and within the current market what prices are being enabled, and then also potentially, as you say, with a significant increase in supply, there may be some downward pressure on prices, but noting that prices are influenced by a lot of things, not just the supply and the plan.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yep, we've definitely seen that over the last year.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Sarah, it's Blair here. Just to add to Amy's response, I mean, I'm particularly interested in the data as well, and you might recall that Chair Ryan in his submission to the Select Committee talked about the potential capacity that all the various areas of growth and plan development that we're working on could have delivered up to potentially 8 times the projected demand for the next decade. Sorry, for the next 30 years. So absolutely that data is critical. And there's a lot of parallels between the work that Amy's just talked about and also our wider HUGS review process and how that links into our thinking around all future growth areas across the city and beyond the city. So it's a key part of our thinking.
Thanks. Okay, there's no other questions. Sarah, you happy to move that item? Seconded by James.
Zero.
I'll take it as non-look as a yes. Thanks, Amy. Is there any debate? I'll take the silence as no. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously, thank you. All right, we're up to item 8, General Manager's report.
Thank you, Chair Ryan. So this report covers quite a range of updates across the program. You'll appreciate that in this time of fluidity, it was written a couple of weeks ago, and it seems like the world has moved on quite a bit even in 2 weeks. But nonetheless, it's giving you an update across the breadth and the scope of the district plan review program. It's often easy just to think about the conversations we're having around this new piece of legislation, but actually, as you'll see in the report, there are many elements to the review program, and so that the report, particularly in the tables in paragraph 34, sort of outline, again, just for your information, the various components that make up the wider district plan review program. And you'll note that in the report we give reference to us needing to stand back and look at the timing and the approach for each of those elements of work, and that's something that we'll explore more in the PX section. But suffice to say that the legislation has obviously changed the focus and the effort of the team that's required. So we're going to need to, and I don't want to use that word pivot, but we're certainly going to need to focus our efforts in the right areas and potentially slow some other things down, and also potentially break up what was going to be one big plan change into smaller parts to enable us to progress that work. So that's just one area of update. The other thing that I would note is, and obviously today we had obviously a presentation from the Claudelands area. Simone is here to take any questions on the sort of communications and stakeholder engagement, but the great thing with that example this morning was they made contact with us through that engagement process, and we identified the opportunity for them to actually come and present through the public forum today. So that process is working well, albeit has been COVID disrupted and probably now RMA legislation disrupted as well. So a little bit dynamic there. You'll note in the report an update on the Fairfield Endley partnership with Kainga Aurora. That's a Kainga Aurora led initiative. Obviously, that's really important to us, a partnership with KO, who potentially will be a major partner to deliver a changed urban form in the Fairfield Endley area. This area was also the subject of a infrastructure acceleration fund bid, which sadly wasn't shortlisted, but nonetheless has given us a lot of information and thinking as to some of the infrastructure considerations that sit in behind the aspirations of that Fairfield Endley partnership. That partnership is looking to deliver interim findings sort of end of Q1 next year, although I feel as though that time frame may slip a bit, so I'm just sort of foreshadowing that at the moment. The other item in the General Manager report is just an update on the Ruakura private plan change, and Council will note that we've entered into an MOU around that particular piece of work that went through Strategic Growth Committee. We've engaged Grant Eccles, who's an expert planner to support Hamilton City Council as we work with Tainu Group Holdings on that plan change. That is in relation to the land known as the tramway block. So that sort of adjoins the sort of Power Road, 5th Avenue area. Quite a large change of land use there being pursued. The aim of that plan change is to be ready probably at the end of 2022, so towards December next year. That's the current time frame, and that will deliver quite a changed development in that Ruakura area. So through the chair, very happy to take any questions or for my team to answer any questions, noting that some of the matters we'll also explore more in the next PX item.
Thanks. I might just ask a couple. And then Martin. On page 22, Blair, paragraph 31, we talk about, you're talking about splitting the plan changes and keeping the qualifying matters together, and you mentioned historic heritage and biodiversity. Where will Te Ture fit into one of those? Was this written before we had that baked in?
This was written before we had that baked in, but it's suffice to say that Te Ture Whaimara will be core to all of our qualifying matters considerations. So, but just happy for everyone in the team wants to expand on that.
Thanks, Blair. Yes, that will be the base for all of our qualifying matters. We're still coming to understand what the bill requires from us and how that will play out.
Thank you. And just in paragraph 63, the risks, there's 8 risks there. But even to me, reading the green, they don't look like they're safe. It looks like the whole thing is volatile. I just wondered if someone could talk through the risks there.
I might be looking to Carmen to support me on this one here. So, look, I think, Chair Ryan, there's different ways to look at these risks. The overall program is certainly not in a green state, just because of the sheer state of where the legislation is at, the timing, the things that we've got to consider, and I guess the work that's ahead of the team to deliver what is required in the timeframe next year. And saying that, within some of these areas, they are green or certainly amber because they are more within our own control, or we've got a greater handle on what is required or the mitigations. I think the strategic one down the very last one there, which is very red, I think summarises that at the highest level, we've now got some pretty serious work to do as a team to come back to you with our revised plan, so we say it, to how we deliver this program. I think those other things there, like we will deliver a response. There's going to be a lot of work required, but certainly, as I say, communications, engagement, those things have been continuing on, albeit COVID disrupted. From a people perspective, certainly it's been a challenging 6 months, but we have a full team on board. We have the full suite of the people. It's basically that it's just the ground is moving underneath us. So Ryan, I'll ask through Carmen that we have another good look at these risks and we reassess them in the light of now what we know, and we'll certainly report any changes.
And I guess just finally on people, you talk about staff wellbeing and burnout. Do you feel you're getting on top of some of that challenge?
Look, I think it's been a tough 6 months. It's been a really tough 6 months, and no one wants to be working in a complex project like this where the goalposts keep changing. And this is I've never ever experienced anything like it in terms of trying to deliver a complex project with this many elements. So staff wellbeing is core to what I'm thinking about, and certainly for Deborah and now with Mark, it will be a constant focus. Our biggest asset is the team and many of the team are here today, and there are also other staff members in other parts of the organisation. So Ryan, it's a key consideration for me, and I think a lot of the team are taking a decent break over the Christmas holidays. That's going to be really, really important because when we come back in the new year, there's a lot ahead of us.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Sarah and then Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Chair Ryan, and thanks, Blair, for that overview. I'm just looking at paragraph 35 where it talks about the specific deliverables. In terms of, so it talks about climate change assessment, and I guess going back to the climate change workshop, which a week or two ago, there was a lot of feedback from members around the district plan in particular, and the idea of driving that 20-minute city concept or 15-minute neighbourhood concept and what that means and things. And I'm and I know Councillor Martin has raised this with you, Chair Ryan, I'm just wondering what the right process is to kind of marry those two conversations together.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah, and certainly the 20-minute look. Very aware of the conversations that are occurring, for example, on the Environment Committee, and very aware of the need to make sure that we capture and join up those key aspirations into the work of the District Planning Committee. In fact, it also extends beyond the District Planning Committee into things such as the HUGS strategy review as well. So the 20-minute city concept, which really in my mind embodies a whole range of elements, is very core to how I'm thinking and how I'm encouraging the team to think about the future of the city. So Chair Sarah, rest assured that we are very much aware of that aspiration, and we're going to utilise all of those concepts as best as we can as we engineer the response to the legislation in the new year. Sorry, Deborah, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say, Councillor, the 20-minute city was a fundamental thinking piece in the development of the area plans, so it has certainly been considered.
I think that the challenge we face, Councillor Thompson, is obviously the RMA legislation doesn't have that as a fundamental pillar, so it's a challenge. In my mind, accessibility is core to 20-minute city and location. That has been unhelpfully overlooked in terms of the direction of the RMA legislation. So I think that'll be, nonetheless, that is going to be where we as a team put on a Hamilton hat and say, how do we deliver a Hamilton nuanced solution that tries to capture as many of those principles as possible, albeit within a legislative framework which is not helping us.
Thank you. And if I'm furrowing my brow, it's just because the sound is quite tinny, sorry. But I'm just catching everything you're saying. I think, I guess one of the issues that came out of that workshop was that Mayor Paula raised in particular I guess the fact that we haven't as a council fully said what a 20-minute city means or what a 15-minute neighbourhood actually means. So I'm just wondering whether it's actually worth us having a conversation around that, so that because the only document that I'm aware of where we actually even go into any detail around what it means is that application to Crown Infrastructure Partners, and beyond that we haven't really delved into the crux of it as a council.
Yeah, and I think, look, you're right, Councillor Thompson, we haven't specifically written a paper to say this is a 20-minute city. I think I'd encourage, once we've had the presentation in the next item round, which covers area plans, and I think you'll start to pick up some of those concepts are core to that, although they're not labelled 20-minute city, but I think the concepts are core to that. I think what you're asking is how do we then explicitly say this combination of things here represents what we see as a 20-minute city, and I think that's a challenge that I've noted, and we can certainly as a team think about how we capture that. You'll be happy to note that in the council meeting tomorrow, our bid, Infrastructure Acceleration Fund bid, executive summary leads out with 20-minute city as a key paragraph. So I've captured that feedback already, Councillor Thompson, and certainly it's a key part of our thinking.
Okay, thank you. Another question, Chair Ryan, was just around the next one, infrastructure needs, and a quick question around when we will have a conversation around open parks and open spaces policy, because I think it's actually up to be renewed next year, but again, I think there is potentially a policy decision to be made around what level of access we want to ensure going forward in these areas which are being intensified to then inform infrastructure needs.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Look, I'm not closely familiar with that matter. I suspect, as I understand it, that policy will dictate I guess, distance of neighbourhood parks and bigger parks to, I guess, certain amounts of populace, which I think would then inform the LTP in terms of investments required. So, like, I'm not familiar with the detail behind that, but certainly there's no doubt as we intensify the city, the linkage to that particular policy will be important, and it does have a direct linkage then to our future LTP requirements. And I just noticed that Jamie is in the audience who has had some past history in that. Is there anything I've missed there, Jamie?
I think that captures it, Blair. I think the only other comment I'd make...
Just come to the mic. Sorry, just getting Jamie Searle, Councillor Thompson, who has a bit of knowledge of this, more than I do.
Sorry, not too much more to add. I think that captures it well, Blair. I think in terms of delegation and where that policy sits, it may report back to the community.
Yes.
So that might just be something to note.
Is that something, Chair Ryan, I'm just wondering how we can progress this. Is it a staff action that we work with community on what, I guess, next steps around that policy? Because my concern is that it does need to reflect these new district plan changes, and when you do that in a timely manner.
Just remind me of the policy you're talking about again?
Parks and open spaces.
So we've got a parks and open spaces policy, and my understanding is that that drives land acquisition decisions for green space in our new areas, but now we're looking at growth styles within our existing areas. I think there needs to be more clarity around what level of service we want to provide for green spaces. So the policy currently says, everyone needs to be within 500 metres walking distance of open space. And that's applied to our new areas, but it's not particularly clear, for example, whether that's going to be sufficient when you have a lot more density. So it's just, and I don't know if it, to what extent it applies to our existing areas. So I'm just keen to refresh our thinking around that to ensure that it's going to be fit for purpose with the plan changes proposed.
Councillor, I'm happy for the team to take that one and have that conversation with the Parks unit and community group. I think I just would probably foreshadow, and I think it's a really, really important observation you've made in the linkage to parks open spaces. I dare say that there may be other implications in other parts of the organisation as well as we start to dive more deeply into intensification. So, it has implications across a range of our city. So I can, the transportation implications, other services. So that may not be the end of it. And what can conceivably be advanced and progressed in line with the timeframes of the district plan, they may not necessarily all work in parallel, but certainly there's no doubt that the implications of the district plan review and the legislation and where the government's driving us has far-reaching implications across the organisation.
So yes, Sarah, and
thank you.
And I know Carmen's talking about area plans a little bit later, and some of that is involved with placemaking and bits and pieces. So there might be the opportunity to have another look at that in PX.
Thank you.
Councillor Martin.
Yes, obviously we will have further discussion around 20-minute city, but can I just ask the chair, with regard to the questions that Sarah raised on the 20-minute city, she's speaking formally as the Deputy Chair of Environment, as I'm now speaking as Chair of Environment. And I think from our workshops and from our work, obviously I just would ask that that particular section of her questions, we just make a minute note, if we could. All right.
Chair Martin, happy to acknowledge that we will absolutely pick that up.
Yeah, yes, because obviously, because this is minutes and naturally the history, and it's obviously, I'm not doubting you're going to pick it up, but I think that's what we're both bringing to you in our portfolio capacities is obviously you've picked up. This is of great significance in terms of and I realise we'll have other opportunities. My question, and in a way it bounces off a little with regard to Sarah's question around the green and open spaces with regard to our brownfields intensification development. If we, for example, we're talking about the Enderley Fairfield partnership and development partnership, and while we have the plan and the concept and the participation of KO, where are we at in terms of what I would call the urban renewal aspect? So, for example, what implications are we thinking that may or may not have for our annual plan LTP in terms of a fundamental urban renewal? I like my voice echoing, and it's emphasising a point. So, you know, you have a street, you know, green canopy, move from the concrete jungle. What do the green spaces look like in terms of intensification, in terms of design? You know, what will the Fairfield Enderley redevelopment look like? So we've got the planning concept here, but surely we have the infrastructure and the green space concept.
So you'll hear soon about some of the area plan work, and obviously if you take what the information you hear about some of the area plans that our team are leading, that's the same work that the Fairfield Enderley partnership led by Kainga is exploring. There are two parts to it. There is the work that kind of describes what they would like to see their vision for that area to be. The second part of their work is an infrastructure investment plan that accompanies that work, Councillor Martin. So that's obviously in train, and that'll be something that we get to see next year. There's no doubt that to deliver the Fairfield Enderley vision, and we'll recall this from the infrastructure bid, that was around about $400 million just to deliver some of the core elements of the infrastructure to support that. That didn't extend to some of the things that you've described, which would be potentially not transport, not water. So if you added in parks and sort of the softer amenity, that cost will be higher than that. So it's a considerable cost. And as Chair Ryan said earlier, he quoted a number in the billions of dollars across some of the area plans. So the numbers are immense.
So just in terms of, you know, a dual journey, you know, a partnership, a shared vision, you're telling me we are developing, are we not, a shared vision with KO and other partners? So when we do this bus trip, right, early in the new year, I've just learned, delighted, are we going to walk around some of these areas just to sort of get a feel on the ground as governors, as representatives, what high density actually looks like for the people who live there? There's no substitute, in my humble view. You actually walk the streets. You actually might notice a pothole there, lack of street lights, lack of trees. And you know what? Even to walk 500 metres for a little bit of green space for many people is still a long way. So I'm trying to, if you like, develop a theme that I really think we need to be on the ground on this.
So I know one of my staff has already helpfully reached out to you in the course of this meeting.
Yes, I'm delighted.
So look, I will be encouraging that particular staff member to work with you and also key representatives of the DP team to scope up the various things that we should see, Councillor Martin.
And what I'm trying to identify through the chair is obviously identify, you know, some very high density, high need areas.
Yep.
Lawn Street, Beta would be an example, you know, but definitely the Fairfield Enderley area.
I think you described it, the good, the bad and the ugly, and also how that all looks, both in terms of now, but also what the legislation could well mean. So you know, I understand exactly what you're after, but we'll certainly make sure that you have a chance just to, with the chair, have some input into where that tour could go.
And just final question, working with, obviously, you know, we talk about a partnership with KO, of course, and I assume that we have a really close partnership with the community in that area, with community leaders in the Fairfield Enderley area.
Ben, did you want to just maybe come? Ben's leading that piece of work from our side, so the simple answer is yes, but I'll let Ben just elaborate.
Can you just clarify the question for me?
Well, it's a bit of a segue into this big staff report we're going to be doing on community committees for the next council. So this is a classic example of everything that's happening in the Enderley Fairfield area. What and how are we integrating and dialoguing and seeking the views and interacting with the key community leaders and representatives in that area? Now, I'm a West Ward councillor, so I apologise, I don't quite have the micro knowledge of the who's who. Sure. So I totally get we as a council are doing this and KO are doing this. I'm just looking at that community interactions.
Thank you, Councillor. Through the Chair, so with the Fairfield Enderley Urban Development Partnership, so that's resourced, being facilitated and led by Council and Kainga Aurora, but from a resourcing perspective, but the partnership is represented by there's a number of other ministries that are within that partnership, as well as the community organisations and mana whenua and iwi representation. Within that partnership, it's looking at the holistic nature of that entire community, not just the rebuild. So part of the direction, part of the mandate that partnership has is to explore the whole connected nature of that community, which raises to the points around parks and transport and other opportunities. From an engagement perspective, we've had a very clear steer from that community that there's been a long history of previous engagement, and what we've done and in progress with the community is compiling all of that and presenting that as, over the years we've heard you say this, and then from there that will be creating with community going, okay, what are the opportunities over the next 18, 24 months to do a deeper dive into practical opportunities around particular precincts or particular corners, communities, where are the transformational opportunities that the community themselves can really input into that co-design opportunity. So they're at the heart of the very project that myself and Kainga Aurora are leading.
It's good, thank you.
Cool, thank you. Thanks, Ben. Let's think, Mayor Paula.
Yes, so I don't need to ask some of the questions because I was going to ask about the Enderley Fairfield project, which was something that I instigated very quickly into my term as mayor. I am interested in what you were saying about the costs. A couple of things. Firstly, I am interested in the criteria as let's set out here, which has Roman numerals 1 to 3. And I think, am I to pick up from the Roman numerals 3, that encompasses all the community and soft infrastructure, the parks, the halls, the community centres. Is that where that sits? Because when I asked for this work to kick off, I envisaged a very holistic approach, not just housing, but the whole revitalisation, social revitalisation. Sorry, so I just want to make sure that that is on the radar.
Ben, so Mayor Paul was talking about paragraph 46, subsection 3, which talks about the guiding the investment. It's the investment plan. Yeah, I mean, Blair, I know this sits under your team, but when we first had that meeting with Kainga Aurora and other stakeholders like Te Koha Health and Tainui up in my office, that was quite some time ago now, so I'm really pleased that it's progressing, thank you. We did talk about the social wellbeing being a key part of that, not just putting more houses in there, but doing that wellbeing stuff. For example, we've got funding for a playground at Papanui Enderley House. When would we put that in? How would that dovetail with the community centre? How would that support the housing around it?
So the partnership is currently developing the partnership plan, which Blair had mentioned is to come in the first quarter of next year. That plan will set out the overall opportunity for the whole community and that revitalisation opportunity. It'll target specifically a short-term build program of individual opportunities that are scattered throughout the community that don't necessarily impact on the the wider transformation, and which is really great to get runs on the board, houses developed where houses need to be developed. And then it'll set out. It'll also, within that initial investment from Kainga Order, the plan will also iterate the investment from the other partners. So the likes of our LTP funded transport program and the renewals that are happening within that from a roading and cycling opportunities within that, that'll be laid out and articulated in the plan as part of those other investments that are happening. So it's not just Kainga Order's investment, it'll be the investments of the partnership that we know at that point of time that we can put our hand to. So there will be gaps in that in terms of the work we're currently doing is identifying the need and the current standard of infrastructure and soft infrastructure and what that need might be. But come April, May next year, we won't have a delivery plan to plug all those gaps, but we'll be identifying that as the opportunity going forward for how that's phase 2 to explore how do we then fulfil those other infrastructure needs. But there will be, it's certainly the intention of the partnership to present up front those other opportunities, not just the housing program.
Thank you. I'll leave it there and maybe make just a couple of comments in debate when we get there. Thanks.
Good. Okay, we'll go into debate now. Moved by myself, seconded by you, Mayor Paula.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your debate.
Oh, me debate. Thank you very much for this good report, by the way. It's very well set out and easy to grip up and clear. Like Ryan, I share concerns over staff. I know that there is pressure in the organisation, and that also translates sometimes to delays in being able to get work done, which of course is something none of us want. So we really need to think about that in our annual plan conversations and other conversations. Fairfield Enderley, I just want to say a few things on that. When I called that meeting together, I don't know when it was, whenever it was, my intention was to lift all of the 4 Wellbeings equally. Now, Kainga Aurora have helpfully come into a partnership, and that's brilliant. However, this can't just be a housing project. Please don't let it be. And I know it sits under your team as growth. It can't just be a housing project. We already know there is a need in that community. We already know they're underserved in terms of really good community infrastructure. I like to think about, if you compare with the northern suburbs of Hamilton, where everything is beautiful and shiny and new, and they're getting a Rotatuna centre and it's all going to be lovely, and then you look into older parts of our city, we can quite clearly see there's a divide between the types of community, and some communities deserve some love and attention, and that's really why I wanted to put the focus on Fairfield and Enderley. But picking up on Martin's comment, same too with Norton, Beda and other areas. And we've also developed a really strong partnership with the police around community safety, and they should absolutely be part of this design, crime prevention through environmental design, and I know they will be, but I just want to make sure that all parts of the equation are in the room at the same time so that we do deliver a safe, nice community to live in. And Te Koha Health have got some pretty big money to invest into that community with their health centre, their primary health centre. It makes sense to me that we would align our work with the work they're doing, you know, so that things come together at the same time, and that we can hopefully provide for the citizens of Enderley, Fairfield, some pride and joy in the place that they live, because they deserve that like anyone else in the city does.
Thank you. Some good points. Councillor Martin.
I just want to totally endorse the observations of the Mayor, and certainly I look at this community, and then down the track, if we're looking at sort of urban renewal, we're looking at community engagement. I also want to thank our staff team for again listing the community consultation and involvement in the sense of history. I thank you for that presentation. But obviously I look at Melville, Beda, There are other areas, particularly Melville Beta, particularly Fairfield Enderley, and dare I say it, even the Old Farm Road University precinct. Really want to have a look at on our bus trip the high density areas, and we're talking about the legislation giving us 3-storey buildings. Well, in the number of cases, for example, in Cameron Road, Old Farm Road, the 3 or 4 are here already. So we already have significant examples of extremely high density area. And I'm really keen that we actually, in terms of ongoing brownfields development, really say, right, what is the ideal here? And it's a green field, it's street lighting, it's street speeds, it's footpaths, it's all of that stuff. So I certainly think that this particular project gives us the golden opportunity to work with the other agencies to come out with a really good looking and a good feel community.
Very good. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Those in favour? Any against? Carried unanimously. I'll just move resolution to exclude public.
Can I just make one comment?
Yep.
Before we go in public? Thank you. I just want to make one comment. Just Mayor Paul, just to give you assurance that whilst that Fairfield Enderley sits within my group, one of the reasons why Ben has got responsibility for that is he's the guardian of the housing strategy, and that's thinking not just in a growth context, but how we are thinking about housing solutions across the city, across all needs. And so I guess this sits in that wider wellbeing housing context. And in the project team, we've also got the community group involved in terms of that. So this isn't just led by my lens. We're taking an organisational approach to this. So just want to give you that assurance.
I appreciate that. You know how strongly I feel about this project.
Absolutely.
When I got on the table last year. So.
Absolutely.
Great. Okay, I'll move resolution to exclude public, seconded by Martin. Those in favour? Carried. We're going to just break for 16, 17 minutes, so we'll come back at 11, and then we're straight into